our company name is Conscious Marketer, but what we really are just wanting you to do is be better communicators, better messengers, in some ways, better servants. How can you connect with people in meaningful ways so that your message is received by those who could use it? And I think PCM gives you some really valuable tools to see whether it's being received. And if it's not, then you can change it so that it can be received in a way that might help that person on the other side. Hi, everybody. This is Richard here. Welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast, and also joined by my co-host, Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hey.
And today we're going to talk about something that we use inside our marketing agency, but also just for communications and messaging in our personal life. And it's something called process communication model, or PCM. And I was introduced to this by Kylie, and I actually have never heard the origin story of how Kylie learned PCM. I think you learned it through a company you were working with back in the day. Is that right?
Yeah, this guy named Brendan Kane, he's a really smart marketer to the famous singers and athletes and everything like that. And he uses it inside his company. And his business partner, Jeff King, is actually somebody who built an entire school around PCM principles and is one of the top trainers in the world. And so we got a private training. They took us through the level 1 and level 2 training just as part of the contract of working there. And I started to put it into the emails that I wrote. Jeff taught me that because of my type, not my personality type, but my perception type, that I was going to be writing through a certain filter. And he taught me how to incorporate other types of perceptions into the emails that I was writing.
Yeah, and so one of the things about this particular system is it's not so much a personality types, but it tracks how you perceive the world, which is super interesting. And there's 6 different ways to perceive the world. I wanted to share the story of how I found out about it through Kylie, because we were on we have a higher end mastermind group that we call the Source, and mainly we just get on calls with people and we're like, hey, is this a good fit for you? And we ask them questions, and it's not so much a interview. We're just trying to find out if it's a right fit. And we had somebody on one of these calls, and Kylie would say something and this person would perk up and be all happy. And you could see this on Zoom, and then I would say something and this person would go weak and collapse in on themselves. And then Kylie would say something, this person would perk up, and then I would say something. And this proceeded for 45 minutes. It was an extremely painful call. And at the end of the call, we got off. And I was like, what the F just happened there? What happened? And so I texted Kylie. I was kind of embarrassed about my performance because it seemed like everything I said was the wrong thing. And I wasn't sure if he didn't like me or they had some relationship, work relationship before. And Kylie texted back and she's like, I just used PCM, And I was like, what the heck is PCM? And she's like, process communication model. And I'm like, oh. And so I didn't really talk to Kylie about it. And so I was like, well, that was, these are, if I can't talk to somebody and she uses this, I think she put on her text, I use this in all my emails. And I was like, okay, if you use this in all your emails and copy, I've got to figure out what this is. So I went on if you Google process communication model, you can get onto their site, which they redid, I think about a year ago. And I just went on to the order section. I was like, well, I'm just going to buy whatever they have because I have to figure this out if my main partner is using this. And so it was kind of funny because I bought their certification, it was I think at the time it was $4,000 or something. And I get an email the next day. It was like, well, can you tell me where you did level 1? And I was like, I don't know about level 1. I just was going for certification, because if, our higher end groups are over $10,000. I was like, well, if it can save one sale or I can communicate better on emails, I'm like, this is going to pay for itself. And when I looked on the site, it looked really legit. And so anyway, the person was like, well, you can't just go to certification. You have to do level 1, then you have to do level 2, and then you can get certified. So they credited my money and refunded the rest. And then I ended up doing level 1, level 2, and then becoming a certified trainer. And then so Kylie and I, we use this inside our copy and our Source. And for me, it's been the most useful. I know it's not a personality type quiz, but it's been the most useful system I've ever learned to interact with people, including my family, which is super interesting. because I have a family with my wife and two daughters, and we're all full. All four of us are different types, which means we're all perceiving the world in different ways, and we all use different language patterns. And you know that phrase like treat everybody how you'd like to be treated. That's actually false. That's not like what people want. People want to be communicated to in the perception and style for which they communicate in. And so we're communicating on like say our channels, think of different channels, and then we're expecting the other person to relate to us, but they're receiving it completely different. Maybe Kylie, you can give us an overview of the system because we're kind of talking about the system, but we haven't explained what it is. Maybe you can share a little bit more about the six styles or, you know, what you know about it.
Yeah. And there's so much to it. I've been studying it for about 3 years now, and I feel like a beginner, but I'll give you the basics of the six types. And then there's also like distress patterns, and there's scripts, and there's drivers, and there's all these things, but I'll give you the breakdown. So basically, when it comes to your base perception, you have one of the six types, and then you also have a phase where it's either the same as your base or it's different, but the base is about your perceptions and the phase is about your motivations and what drives you. So we'll talk about the base. First we have the promoter base. And the promoter is basically the get it done person. You'll see this in a lot of Hollywood actors and or politicians. It's only 5% of the population, but people love promoters. They want to be around them. They want to catch that wave because they're just action, action, action. So like every action flick, sports teams, you'll see this vibe in a lot of that. Then we have the persister, which is what Richard and I's base is. And they see the world through opinions, values, and beliefs. So a lot of integrity is important to the persister. They will take actions based around what they really believe in. You'll see a lot of this in like social work or social justice movements, or for us, it's internet marketing, but it's internet marketing with a values-driven twist. And most of our clients, I would say, are persisters. So I do write a lot of the copy in that language of beliefs, values, opinions, and people do respond to it. So the next is the rebel. The rebel is all about spontaneity. It's about reaction. So my mom has a rebel base, and she throws these like big elaborate parties. And in her big elaborate parties, like she wants people to walk in and have a reaction to the way the table is decorated or the way that she's done all the little intricate details. And so everybody comes in and they go, and that's like, she thrives on that. She loves that so much. So the rebel is like,
my youngest daughter is a rebel, and it's always about how can we make something fun? How can we make it exciting? You know? And so we don't do tasks. We make things fun, and then we go after them. And it's really interesting. And to motivate her, we have to like think of interesting ways to do things. So.
And they said like, you'll never see a rebel at a funeral. That's what Dean, one of my mentors, told me one time. He's like, you won't see them at anything sad or serious. Like if they can help it, they won't do it. So we have the thinker base. The thinker base is perceived through thoughts. They like information. They like statistics. They like orderliness. They work really, really hard. They want to be appreciated for the time spent on tasks. And they will get frustrated if they feel like people are not working as hard as them, or people are making a lot of mistakes. They get really frustrated by that. I think it's like 30% of the population is thinker, maybe something like that. And 75% of that 30% is men. So you'll see women that have a thinker base, and it's harder for them to relate to people. For example, Hillary Clinton, she was a thinker base. She actually knows PCM because Bill Clinton is the top student of PCM in the entire world. But so she couldn't connect with her base that much because most women are harmonizers, which I'll talk about in a moment. And she couldn't connect with her base because they're not thinkers, and she wouldn't get out of that perception. So she'd get up there and rattle off like policy, and she knew the policy, right? She's super smart lady, but she couldn't get people to relate. Whereas Bill Clinton was one of the most liked presidents of my entire lifetime. And, you know, he kind of sunk downhill since then. But when he was president, people liked America, you know, everything was cool. Like things were good in the country, and it kind of went downhill. But the PCM is a lot of that. Then we have the harmonizer, which is most of women. And this is about feelings and sensory experiences. And the guy who Richard talked about that sales call with, he actually he was a male harmonizer. And male harmonizers are a bit more uncommon, just like the female thinker is a bit more uncommon. And so a lot of times the male harmonizers have a harder time. People call them, too sensitive or too emotional, especially in the Western countries. It's just really, really hard for them. But they're all about feeling sensory experiences. When you're speaking to a harmonizer, you want to say things like, together with you, I'm here for you, like stuff like that. And then lastly, but not least, we have the imaginer whose perception is imagination, fantasies. Imaginer is my least strong energy. And I thought, but I'm always thinking about stuff and fantasizing and daydreaming. And Dean, my mentor, he was like, yeah, but what are you thinking about? And I'm like, oh, success and growing the company and, just like reading a lot of books. And he's like, yeah, if you're an imaginer base, you're daydreaming about riding a magical unicorn over the sun and then saving a little kingdom. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, no, I definitely don't think about that. So those are the 6 types. And what you really want to be able to do is be fluid. So when you take the test, which actually you could take through Richard because he's an instructor, when you take that test, you'll see what they call a condominium, where you have a base, and basically it's like a stack of bars, and you go up, and the more your base and phase, you have 100% access to that energy. But as you go up, you may have like 80 or 70 or 40. And if you have less than 40, then that floor is going to really exhaust you. You're not going to be able to achieve it all that well. So for me, my harmonizer was like 20%, and I expanded it up to like 80% last time I took the test, because I really practiced wanting to be able to connect with people that were in the feeling perception. So that's like the briefest way that I could explain it. It's pretty exciting stuff.
I think it's exciting also because it helps you get a better sense of where you get filled up by energy and also where you get drained, kind of like, because all of us have access to each of the 6 floors or the 6 types, but some of them are more full. It's like the gas tank, and some of them is more full. And then also you can identify what other people are pretty quickly by their facial expressions, by their language patterns, and then you can figure out different ways to connect with them. It's different, I would say, than NLP, in that there's it's a cleaner structure, and the program was actually developed and used at NASA to pick astronauts, which is super interesting. I think they funded a lot of initial research. So it has a huge science-based backing behind it as well. And in the United States, it's actually not as popular. I'm based in Europe now, and it's a lot more popular over here. I think their headquarters is in France, actually. So there's a lot of trainers, and it's used a lot more in corporate ways here. I think probably you're going to see it used more subtly in a lot of different ways. There are certain companies that use AI and stuff for like call centers and stuff, and they're identifying like the language patterns that you're using, and then matching you so that you can have the best experience, which kind of makes sense. So if you want clear, concise sentences with direction, that's a thinker, which is I think 60% of the U.S. male population. Then you're gonna get responded to, or if you're using it in your own life or whatever, that's how you want to talk to somebody in the channel that they're wanting to receive. But if you're talking to somebody who's a harmonizer, that's like chalk on a chalkboard or whatever. It's like they want the feeling in the heart. I think it's kind of interesting that the largest percentage of men in the United States are thinkers, and the largest percentage of women in the United States are harmonizers. It's kind of like the yin yang of how we relate and talk to one another. Maybe Kylie, could you share a little bit about because this is a marketing podcast, and you might be asking yourself, why are they talking about this process communication model? And there's a couple models I use in terms of like how to think about marketing, but you can think of your market in terms of groupings, in terms of like, what is my market made up of? So I know when we go to write copy, like email copy and sales pages, and if we know that there's, say, persisters and harmonizers, then we're going to take one tact or use one types of language just so that we can authentically connect with them better, and so they can understand what we're offering. But if it was another type, maybe it was more a rebel, more a fun kind of offer, then we would use completely different language. And so definitely relevant. Kylie, how have you kind of blended it into your copy and how you think about how you relate to people when you go online?
Yeah. So I basically try to look at what our audience is resonating with the most. And I think we have a lot of persisters in our base and harmonizers. So I try to make my copy really about beliefs and values. And I say a lot of like, I believe in you, which is all true. In case you're thinking like this is manipulative, it's not. We're not like using certain words and certain types of languaging so that we're not doing that so that we can manipulate. We're doing it so we can connect. In fact, Jeff King, the guy that initially trained me, they had a program that they did on PCM, a paid program called Connecting at Scale. And I thought that was really brilliant. It's like, how do you go deep with people and really have a lot of empathy and compassion by speaking their language? And you can see this in everyday life too. You can see, if you speak to somebody in their love language, for example, they melt. And if you speak to them in like their least strong love language, they're like, you don't listen to me, or you don't pay attention to me, or you don't love me. And it becomes fighting, right? So this is about kind of mastering somebody's language. Now, I know we have a lot of persisters, a lot of harmonizers. So there's a lot of language about beliefs and values and feelings. And I feel you and I'm with you. And even when I'm just writing a webinar, like bullets in an email where it says like, here's what we're going to cover, I'll say, here's what we're going to cover together, because that speaks to the harmonizer. And then with the other four types, I sprinkle them in, and just like maybe a couple promoter words, a couple action words when I'm saying like, click here now, that's for a promoter. They like that. They like just to be told what to do so they can just do it. And then with the other types, like for the thinkers, I'll sprinkle in a couple of stats, or, I'll say something like, oh, this is how we sold 350,000 courses, because that's what they want to hear. And so I just kind of sprinkle in all the other types, but I stick with what I know our audience is resonating with. And then I try to put that in every email or every ad.
Yeah, I think another really good use case for a lot of you out there, if you're listening to this and you work with other people, say you're a coach or a therapist or a healer, or maybe you run a marketing agency, and you have a lot of different types of clients, then all your clients are going to have their own individual styles, and you'll be able to talk to them and help them in the language that they need to hear so that they can take action and get results. I think one of the other interesting parts about PCM is that it has what they call distress patterns. And so when you're talking to somebody, like kind of rewinding back to that sales call that went bad with Kylie and me, mostly bad for me, uh, if I had been trained in PCM, I would have recognized, oh, this guy is a harmonizer. He was a harmonizer male, if I remember correctly, and I was relating to him more as a persister or as a thinker, and I also have a strong promoter because I want people to take action to get results. And so he needed a little more sensitivity, which I didn't provide for him, and Kylie provided it for him. um, but if I had shown that I had that side, I do have that side. I have to bring it out. It's one of my top floors. It's something I'm working on too. So, then I could have coached him, whether he became a client or not, that's something different, but at least we would have had a better interaction. But especially after somebody hires you, they hire you to get results. And if you are having trouble communicating what their next step is, or like I said, every one of these 6 things has a distress pattern. And so the distress patterns, there's specific things they do with the sentences or their body posture and language. You'll hear it and see it. And when you start to know what the signs are for the distress patterns, they're kind of like early warning signals. And then you can recover if something's going wrong. Whereas if you don't know the distress pattern, you think you've communicated something right and everything's going well, and actually everything hasn't gone well, and you walk away and they're confused, and you don't even realize that you've put them in distress, which is I would say unconscious communication. But you're not doing it purposely. It's not your intent, but that's what you've done. Whether it's your intent or not, you've probably done that. So I think it raises the bar on what I would say is conscious communication. we our company name is Conscious Marketer, but what we really are just wanting you to do is be better communicators, better messengers, in some ways better servants. How can you connect with people in meaningful ways so that your message is received by those who could use it? And I think PCM gives you some really valuable tools to see whether it's being received, and if it's not, then you can change it so that it can be received in a way that might help that person on the other side.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the distress patterns. Basically, people based on their base and their phase, they go into distress in a very patterned, very particular way. And that means you can intervene. At first degree and second degree distress, you can intervene. And at third degree, Dean always tells me that that person is going to need to go into therapy or get professional help. Like, you can't really help. But if somebody goes into first distress, it's the pattern of their base. And what you do is you get into channel with them. So you mirror their hand gestures, their body positioning, their facial expressions, their tone, and you want to like get in channel with them so that they relax. And then at second degree distress, you offer what's called psychological needs. So each type has a certain psychological need. For us, the persisters, well, actually, he's not a persister phase, but I am. So for the persister phase, the psychological needs are recognition of work and value. So if someone tells me like, you're doing such great work, it's really making an impact, like, then I'll be like, oh, thanks. The persister third degree distress is attacking. So I'll start to find everything. If I'm super distressed, I'm going to start to find everything wrong with everyone around me. And it used to be like that for me before I learned this model. I used to go there pretty fast. They also have something called plus, 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 minus, minus, plus, minus, minus. And it's like, if you're in plus, plus, that's the goal of PCM, is to be in plus, plus. And that's, I'm okay, you're okay. And that's where communication can happen. If I go into plus, minus, which persisters do all the time when they're stressed, then it's, I'm okay, you're not okay. And then there's, I'm not okay, you're okay, which is more like the harmonizer, is like, oh, you're better, you're right, and I'm making a mistake. And then there's minus, minus, where I'm not okay, you're not okay. And that's like massive distress. So you always want to be thinking like, how can I be in plus, plus communication? And that's another aspect of it.
That's kind of PCM. You went kind of in. I love the plus 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 minus minus plus plus minus or whatever. It's a really good way. That comes from it was built on something called transactional analysis. You don't need to know that, but check out process communication model. Reach out to us if you want to figure out how to put that into your marketing. We use it in our agency when we're doing all of our launches, and Kylie, as our main brand and storytelling person, obviously uses it. And then in our higher end source, we actually have everybody take the test so that everybody knows what they are. Some people really love the model. We've had a few outliers who are like, I'll never use this. This isn't for me. So you just have to decide whether it's for you. You may have another system or something else that you like, and that's fine too. I have one other system that I use to think about how to coach somebody, and maybe in a future episode, I'll share that one as well. But PCM is super powerful. You can go to processcommunicationmodel.com to kind of learn more about that. Any other thoughts about PCM, Kylie? I think this has been kind of a fun episode.
Yeah, I would recommend a book, because a lot of the books on process communication model were written by the founder, and he's like a super mad scientist genius, but it's really difficult to get through the book. But my mentor, Dean Hefta, he wrote How We Connect Using Process Communication Model to Build Healthy Relationships. I would definitely check that out. He's really clear and easy, and I studied with him for about a year, and he really helped me a lot. So check that book out. And again, if you have interest in getting your profile done, then you can purchase that through Richard, which we've never really offered before, but we do have that option for you. If you're interested, just hit us up.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll just say one last thing about why I like the model is a lot of these personality typing models, it's about who you are, but it doesn't give you clear directions as how it's useful when you interact with other people. There's a few other things out there that kind of do, but then you're kind of like guessing, where this one actually breaks it down. You can actually see with the people you're interacting with how to change how you're communicating and perceiving the world so that you can be in channel. And this is something that we all want to do as parents, as business owners, as marketers. So, well, thanks for joining us today, learning a little bit about communication model. When I found it, I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing I've ever seen and developed. I was so excited about it. I still, even years later, I just love the system. It's one of my favorites ever. If you want to get the show notes, you can go to consciousmarketer/podcast. And we don't run ads on this, but if you could do us a favor, if you get something from this and you learn something that's really been useful, go on Apple iTunes and leave us a review. That really helps us get the show out to more people. Thanks, Kylie, for a wonderful episode. This has been a lot of fun.